Welcome back to KIRUTZ, the key roots of sex addiction. My name is Collin, and today we are going to discuss the solution as it pertains to sexaholism. And in order to understand the solution, we need to review the problem again. Now, if you want the problem to be discussed in greater detail, you can go back to a video that I recently posted called The Problem. And so let's review that. So first of all, I want you to understand that everyone wants to feel good, but that's not what happens all the time. People from time to time will feel bad. And that creates this drive to feel good again. And there's a physiological reaction to that. Now, that's not a problem. But for the sexaholic, and in general, people have what I call the Great Delusion. They turn to tools or skills that they believe will actually make them feel better that won't. That's what I call the Great Delusion. For the sexaholic, he believes that sex is going to cure his negativism. And the problem with that is that sex doesn't cure pain. It's kind of more like a poison Tylenol is how I describe it. It will relieve your pain for a period of time. But really what's happening is it's killing you slowly over time, and that's the poison part. And that leads into tolerance. Now, what is tolerance again? Tolerance is when an individual uses a medication over time, or you could say substance, maybe even alcohol, and over time it's utilized to make one feel better. But the body becomes acclimated or accustomed to the substance, and then it doesn't work as effectively. And therefore, an individual has to use more of it to get the same outcome, to feel the same positivity as they did in the beginning when they were taking less. For the sexaholic, that happens. The sexaholics engage in certain forms of sexual behavior, and it makes them feel really good in the beginning. And as they utilize the same sexual behavior over and over again, it doesn't make them feel as good. So what they do is they resort to more frequent sexual behavior, or they start to change their sexual behaviors. And oftentimes, when they change their sexual behaviors, their types of sex get more risky and actually produce more severe consequences, which is this last point here, which is that the bad feelings caused by the sexual behaviors continue or escalate, and they get worse, which leads the sexaholic back into the Great Delusion, believing that more sex or different types of sex will cure his problems, and they just don't, and things get worse and worse and worse over time. So that's a basic explanation of the problem. Just to get a little bit more understanding to you, this drive to feel good it's a physiological thing. We feel it in our bodies, and then we interpret it in our minds as that these bad feelings are bad and that we need to feel good. Okay. The Great Delusion, again, for the sexaholic, is believing that he needs to cure his bad feelings with sex. And then the other aspect is this amnesia. Oftentimes, sexaholics eventually come to the conclusion that they can't keep acting out sexually like they are because it's causing too many problems in their life. But over time, as they get clean, they begin to forget that they can't utilize sex or even lust as their cure. So if they know that sex is causing them problems, what they'll tell themselves is, I can't do that anymore. And then tomorrow, when they get stressed out, they will, or their brain will bring up sex as a solution to their bad feelings. And the sexaholic will say, nope, can't do that. Same thing will happen the next day and the next day. And then possibly 6 months from now, they might not be acting out. But at some point, they experience this amnesia that they forget that they cannot act out sexually. And so they do. And then all of a sudden, all of the consequences occur, the bad feelings arise, and then the cycle starts all over again. The poison is poisoning them, and they're dying emotionally, and sometimes it can even lead to physical death, depending on the behavior that's involved. So what's the sexaholic solution? When you know the problem, um, we need to understand that part of the problem is not solvable. Uh, Everyone who feels bad is going to always be driven to feel good again, and that's a physiological issue. It's not solvable. So we need to recognize that we will always strive to feel better. Emotions, and I wanted to say that emotions, all emotions are normal. You're going to feel all emotions most likely throughout your life. Now, you can get more and more positive, I believe, to the point where you can get really good and feel great most of the time. However, I still believe that you're going to experience things like anger, fear, sadness for a lifetime. You just might get better at dealing with them. So, the second part of the solution is that the sexaholic needs to awaken from his delusion. He's got to recognize that a sexual behavior does not cure his negative feelings and that it actually is poisoning him. So if he doesn't come to that conclusion, he's not going to start changing. So that's he's really got to wake up to that. He also needs to recognize that he needs to improve his emotional regulation. Uh, we need to learn to feel good more of the time. And the sexaholic needs to learn to resolve his negativity in ways that works. Instead of continuing to go back to sex, which doesn't work, he needs to find other ways to deal with his negativity. And then he also needs to learn distress tolerance. Like I said, we're always going to feel, let's say, anger, fear, and sadness at some point in our lives. And if that happens, we need to be able to be in it without turning to skills or tools that actually make life worse. Another part of the Sexaholic Solution is that we're dealing with this amnesia. We forget that we cannot act out sexually in the ways we did before. And so we must remember that we can't turn to sex in the way we did before for a sexaholic. We cannot use sex to cure emotional negativity. Because if the sexaholic forgets, he'll just go back to his addiction, which will create havoc and destroy his life as it once did before. All right. So then the question becomes, how do we awaken from a delusion or better regulate our emotions and remember the problem that we can't turn to our sexual behaviors again or to emotional negativity? Well, I think the answer ultimately is education and self-evaluation. Through education and self-evaluation, we break through what I call the first illusion, which is there's nothing wrong with my sexual behaviors. If we don't educate ourselves and evaluate and break through that delusion, well, we'll continue in our addiction as long as we're in this delusion. Through education and self-evaluation, one learns that he's got major problems with his sexual behaviors. Through education and self-evaluation, one learns he has deeper issues than sex. He is addicted to lust. So what is lust again? Lust is a belief that a natural instinct serve a purpose it was never designed to serve. So a sexaholic has a belief that sex again will cure his bad feelings. And through self-evaluation and education, he'll learn again that doesn't work. Lust, another definition of lust is wanting something and not getting it and not being okay about not getting it. So when one when one doesn't get something he wants, he or she will turn to bad feelings like selfishness, dishonesty, delusion, resentment, or fear. Actually, I call all of these defects of character. That's a 12-step thing. When one is educated, becomes and self-evaluates, one finds out that turning to selfishness, dishonesty, delusion, resentment, and fear only causes more selfishness, dishonesty, delusion, resentment, and fear, which creates more drive to solve the emotional pain. And for the sexaholic, again, he'll turn to his sexual behaviors if he keeps going negative. Through education and self-evaluation, one finds out he's turning to pain to solve pain. It doesn't work. He must turn to core. So a definition, quick definition that I have is of core is that core is love, kindness, peace, a sense of security, despite the circumstance. So what I'm saying here is, despite what's going on around you, you can feel love, kindness, peace, and a sense of security. I have another video about core that explains core in much more detail. So if you'd like that, feel free to go back to YouTube and find core, the video. Through education and self-evaluation, one finds out he can no longer turn to negativity. He just can't do it. He must resolve negativity effectively if he is to stay sober. And he must learn the skills or new tools that actually create core or positivity. Now, a sexaholic often shies away from the solution, and I'm going to give you more of that information and what that entails. Simply because it is unknown territory. It is often predicted by the sexaholic to be more painful than helpful at first. So when the sexaholic learns about what the solution is, he feels that it's going to be much more painful. It's going to be a struggle, and he tends to dread it and walk away from it simply because he thinks it's more uncomfortable than his current state in his addiction. So the sexaholic would rather stay with his current pain that he knows and that he's acclimated to than to do something different, which will actually solve his problems. Therefore, the sexaholic suffering must eventually outweigh the pain of implementing the solution to become teachable. This is called hitting rock bottom. It means that the sexaholic has become so humbled that he becomes willing to both listen to the solution and follow through with the suggested action steps to heal. It is by severe pain that anyone comes to see me. And usually that's 99.9% of the people I see. They're ready to get a divorce. They're going to lose their family. They have a life-threatening STD. They get arrested. And those things are so painful, they finally recognize that they cannot keep doing what they do. So they come and seek help, which was overwhelmingly scary before. And now that they're in such pain, they're willing to do that, which is really scary to them. So to heal, the sexaholic must listen and learn and take the action required to progress in recovery. Listening and learning alone do nothing. So listening and learning without action don't produce a whole lot of recovery results. So one has to actually take the steps of action to produce recovery results. After hitting rock bottom, he must find others who know the recovery process, listen to these people, and follow their counsel. These individuals include counselors and sober individuals from support groups, which often include a sponsor. So you can find sponsors in multiple different types of support groups. Usually the common support groups out there are 12-step groups, and oftentimes counselors who are educated in sex addiction will refer you to helpful support groups. But the sexaholic ultimately has to follow the suggested advice of these people, otherwise they won't get better. To become humble enough to listen and follow other suggestions, it's possible that the sexaholic needs to relapse and go through multiple bouts of severe suffering. Becoming humble and submitting to the recovery process is often a process in and of itself. And this is a real struggle for partners because the sexaholic will often relapse because he's not following the suggested advice of counselors and others, in the support programs. And most likely, like I was saying earlier, is because of fear. These things are too hard. It takes too much time. It's scary and embarrassing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then what has to happen is the sexaholics will relapse. And when he relapses, he causes just crazy amounts of pain for those in his life, especially his significant other. And so the significant other just wants the addict to end all of his sexual behaviors now, and oftentimes that's just not possible. And don't get me wrong, there are sex addicts out there that don't relapse again, but there are many who do, so that's not uncommon. So how do we educate ourselves? We educate ourselves, at least through my process, through reading. And reading, I know I say reading, but I also mean listening to podcasts or listening to audibles or going to seminars. There are intensive workshops out there. And so ultimately we're going to places with professionals or with individuals who know the recovery process and we are learning from them. And I stuck that in here too, that we're talking with others, such as counselors and recovered individuals, and we find them, and these other individuals we find in support groups. So this is how we educate ourselves about sexaholism and the recovery process. And then how do we self-evaluate? So I utilize prayer and meditation, writing styles, and then reviewing our lives with the counselors and recovered individuals. Um, it is through these self-evaluative skills that I'll teach in later videos that individuals have a lot of aha moments. An aha moment means that you're learning something new, you're understanding something that you never understood before, and then when you apply your understanding, then you create the results, and that's how healing occurs. So we need to be doing all of these steps on a daily work. So that's why I say in this slide that this is daily work, and therefore I call these skills dailies. So I recommend that anybody come out of delusion, that people learn to regulate their emotions, and that they keep their recovery top of mind through the dailies, working daily, prayer, meditation, reading, writing. Now, attending recovery meetings, I don't tell people to do these daily unless they absolutely need it. But I do recommend a minimum of 3 meetings per week. I just throw it in the daily category, but 3 meetings a week is a minimum. Remember that minimums mean that you can attend more meetings. So some people will do 90 meetings in 90 days. That's at least a meeting every single day, and sometimes more if you miss a day. And so we just need to do what we need to get clean. And then we do daily phone calls. And now I suggest a minimum of 1 phone call a day. If you have a sponsor from a 12-step group, I recommend calling him every single day. On the other hand, I also recommend that we make 3 phone calls a day. And the reason is because we really need to stay in touch with others. Oftentimes we isolate ourselves as sex addicts. We need phone calls because when we're triggered, we need someone to help us set up a effective plan to keep us sober. A third reason why we make daily phone calls is if we act out, we don't want to keep acting out. So we need to call somebody and make a plan so that we don't act out anymore and cause more problems in our lives. Now, the fourth reason we make phone calls is because usually sex addicts are very selfish people. We really struggle to keep others in mind when we are, let's say in our sexaholism, we don't think about the consequences of other people really. We just bulldoze ahead in our sexaholism, and then we hurt a lot of people. So what the opposite would be is calling people to help them. And so that's another reason why we make daily phone calls. So it's hard to do that maybe in just 1 phone call. But when we do 3 phone calls a day, it's much more plausible. Now, the dailies are our relapse prevention program. This is how we wake up from our delusional thinking. This is how we learn to regulate our emotions, and this is how we keep from forgetting that we cannot lust or act out sexually anymore. I'd like to tell people that we also sometimes need a little extra help for the sexaholic. We need a little bit more than the dailies. And what I'm talking about here is for the beginner, it can be very difficult to end his or her sexual acting out without putting some buffers between him and the sexual behaviors. And so these are just 4 examples of a buffer that an individual who is a sexaholic can utilize to give him time to think before he acts out. So the internet is a terrible place for a sexaholic in the beginning because the internet and pornography are kind of like the cocaine of sexaholism. Maybe it's the meth these days of sexaholism. It'll just grab a sexaholic, grab the attention of a sexaholic real quick, and he won't be able to stop the urges or stop himself when the urges hit if he's got access to the internet just openly. So oftentimes I recommend people getting an internet filter. Some guys spend a ton of money, and if they got money in their pocket, they're going to act out sexually. So they might need financial accountability. Social media is oftentimes just terrible for the sexaholic, whether he's watching pornography through there, he's contacting individuals for sexual contact. So oftentimes we need to eliminate social media, and maybe even media altogether, including TV and radio, because oftentimes there's sexual content there that just triggers the sexaholic. And in the beginning, again, he can't really withstand. And then some guys need a location tracker, just to have someone knowing where they are at all times, so they don't end up at a strip club or on in some part of downtown that he shouldn't be in. So these are just helpers. They're not the end all be all. But they are very helpful in the beginning for a sexaholic. So this is the extra help that the sexaholic can utilize to start getting clean. Now, as we do our dailies, we will naturally awaken from our delusion over time. As we educate ourselves, have aha moments, and then evaluate, we will just wake up over time. Now, it does take time. It's not an immediate thing, and there's a lot to wake up to. So don't think that this is a quick process. Most times, the healing or people with sexaholism are very, very sick people, and it may take years to awaken from all the delusion and the lies that a sexaholic tells himself. So this can take quite a bit of time. But if you do your dailies over time, you'll naturally just awaken. To better regulate our emotions and to overcome the fear of doing dailies, we will need to better understand our emotions, what they are, and which skills are needed to mold them into positivity effectively. So when we are learning to manage our emotions, we really need to learn what emotion is. Okay. So the next topic of the video the next video's topic will be to define emotions specifically and the components of emotion, so that you can understand how you need to address emotion and which skills are utilized for each component of emotion. And then I will teach specific skills that address the different components of emotion, so that you can start to live a more peaceful life, a more happy life. And then also increase your distress tolerance, meaning that, again, when you feel negative, that you can be with it rather than turn towards vices like sex or drugs or alcohol or gambling or something like that. We want to make sure that when we're distressed, that we can tolerate it in a better way that doesn't continue to cause let's say, really severe consequences in your life, like sex addiction can. So with that said, it was good to be with you today. Feel free to reach out at any time. You can go to KIRUTZ.com. The spelling is right there on the screen, KIRUTZ.com, and contact me. Reach out if you have any questions that you'd like answered. I'd love to answer any questions that you have. So have a great day, and we will see you in the next video.